much for organising this and getting everybody here, and welcome. I'm Veronica Hannon, but everybody calls me Ronnie, so please do so. I am the Managing Director of Transform Communications and the co-founder with my business partner Dan, who's on the call today, of Transform Digital Marketing. And we've got quite a big question to answer, really, to put the pressure on, which is can you market your way out of a pandemic? And we're going to look at that, and I'm sure everybody wants a one-word answer. Primarily they want yes, but I think I will be saying yes, but, or also no, unless. So we'll be looking at some of those differences. So yes, you can if you do these sorts of things. No, you can't. But if you put these in place, you stand a better chance of it. I'll also be taking through some research, some facts and figures, and then some stories. And it would be great at the end if we could also just have a real sort of understanding of what you've gone through, what you've put in place, what has worked, what hasn't worked for you, what you have seen, and very happy to share any advice or ideas as we get to the end. So yeah, please do use this as an engaging and interactive experience as much as possible. So just a few minutes to go through who we are. So Transform Communications is a thought leadership, content marketing and PR consultancy. We're based in Bradford-on-Avon. I say we're based in Bradford-on-Avon. Actually, we're based in Bradford-on-Avon, Bath, Somerset, Bristol, and all the way around, as we are all working remotely at the moment, although we hope that is going to change very soon. And Transform Digital Marketing is our sister company that we launched during the pandemic back in July this year, and then essentially, well, we incorporated in July and went to market in October. So I'll tell you a little bit about some of that story as well as we go through. So in terms of where we are now, and I think it's quite incredible to think we've actually got a full 12 months nearly to be able to reflect on what has happened, what we've all gone through, to consider just how much we really have adapted, and give ourselves a little bit of credit, because the world today is very, very different from the world it was a year ago. Also to acknowledge that actually it's been incredibly tough and difficult for a lot of people. A lot of businesses have closed, a lot of people have lost their jobs, and there's been a loss of life that has been quite tremendous, and the impact has been severe on each and every one of us, really, both from a personal perspective, a professional, but also just in terms of some of what we've had to go through, and the stress and anxiety that the situation has put us all through, really. And if we look at that, you know, from a business perspective, and the impact that has come through, yeah, in research from the States showed that really between February and April 2020, we had a reduction of 25% of businesses, nearly 25% of businesses temporarily closed or ceased trading. That is a phenomenal impact. Just in terms of the sheer quantity of businesses that have been affected. And even if we then go through, and I'm not comparing like for like here, because this is stats from the Office of National Statistics. So this is UK statistics, but that showed that there was only 82% of businesses were trading by November 2020. And in accommodation and food, some of the hardest hit sectors, that was down to 63%. And if you look at that, that's 1 in 3 businesses that had closed by November. So we can't underestimate how much this has touched all of us, and the pressure that it's put on, and how people have really had to adapt. On the positive side of things, which is what I hope we can really look at today, some of the creativity and the innovation and the positivity that has come out of it. You know, what have businesses done right during this time? And I would actually say a big well done to everybody who's here, because to have gone through a year and come out and still be here, I think is testament to just how well people have done and changed and adapted. I want to have a little bit of a look at what some people have done well, and lessons that we've learned. And when I look back, I would say a crisis has a very, very sort of fundamental impact on us from a psychological and from a physiological perspective. We literally feel an impact as it comes through, and part of that means that we revert to a comfort zone of what we want to get back to. We need to create a sense of normality around us, a sense of control. What that means is that people can actually go straight into action, and they can do stuff, any stuff, as long as they're doing stuff to keep themselves busy, get our heads down and just get on with it. And actually at a point that has a place, because obviously when the doors closed on the 23rd of March and we went into first lockdown, there was a lot that needed to be sorted out. But also what COVID has given us is most probably one of the most undervalued things that we have, which is time. And for a lot of us, it gave us a little bit of a sense, and once we'd got over that initial upheaval, it gave us a little bit of time to be able to consider what it is we really need to do. And our main piece of advice when it comes to that question, can you market yourself out of a pandemic? Yes, if you think strategically and not tactically. And the strategic aspects fall into four main buckets, and they are consecutive. So you don't just do number 4, you know, do these in order. And we'll just touch on these as we go through, and each of these is most probably a talk in its own right, and I tend to do this, try and cram everything in, but I'll give you just a taste of what I mean by each of these. And the first one is about purpose, and we're great fans of a guy called Simon Sinek. I'm sure that many of you have heard of him. He is an American coach now, has started up a business, came out from a marketing perspective. And this is, if you haven't heard of him, by the way, he does a fabulous 18-minute TED Talk, which talks about start with why. And it's most probably the most simple model that you can have for marketing. And it works on the basis of going, most people will talk about what they do, the products or the services that they sell or provide. A few companies will talk about how they do it differently. And that might be your point of differentiation. And even fewer will talk about why they do it, which is the core sense of purpose or your belief or what gets you out of bed in the morning. So if you think about that in terms of computer sales, you can talk about, you know, the latest model that Dell has brought out, and it's a fantastic new model, and it enables X, Y, and Z amount of processing and great big speeds, and it's got Intel this inside and all the rest of it. It doesn't really engage, it becomes a commodity. If you talk about how they do it, they might talk about the user experience, the fact that it's easy to navigate, the fact that you can have multiple programs open, that you can be streaming music, be watching Netflix and all the rest of it. But if you get to the why, and a lot of people will say this is where Apple got it right. You know, Apple is about the democratization of technology, but making it easy to use every day. So you can open it up and you can experience a world that's enabled by technology. You don't have to have a PhD in IT to be able to operate an Apple Mac. So start with why, find your core purpose and belief, and that will give you an ability to be able to really connect with people on a different and a deeper level when you go out to market. The second point that I mentioned was about customers, about putting customer needs. And this was a fascinating piece of research that was done by the Rockefeller Institute, which shows that why do customers, so we all talk about customer loyalty, and marketing is very often concerned with putting things in the top of the funnel. So we need to get new business, we need to get new leads in, we need to connect with more people, we need to go out and be more visible. And that's what marketing tends to be concerned with. And we very rarely concentrate on the great big wealth that already exists in everybody's inboxes, contact numbers, LinkedIn profiles, existing customers, customers that might have used your services, but now might have moved to somebody differently, somebody different. And if at a base level, if you ask people why they leave a business, it tends to come down to they believe that a company doesn't care about them. And that is just appalling when we think about the amount that we are wasting in terms of the connections that we have. And it was a lesson that I think COVID has really brought home to us, is that especially in those early stages, you couldn't go out and get new customers because people weren't necessarily buying at that point. So how could we survive? What could we do to market our way out of that? Oh, gorgeous. What we can do is concentrate on the customers that we do have. And that means actually really looking at establishing a better and a closer relationship with people that we work with. Dan, myself, and the team at Transform spent a lot of time on the phone on those initial months, and still continue today, in terms of really picking up and just asking, how are you? How is things going? And one of the things from COVID is that it was an experience that everybody went through. So there was a connection there, and we were able, and I think everybody has been able to say, you know, during this time you got closer to people, you saw their lives, you saw the impact, you know, you heard the children on the calls, you got to see inside people's homes. There was a case of actually, if you spent the time to begin to form those better connections. The second point, send emails. And emails have been one of those things in marketing that everybody talks about actually declining. And yes, in some cases it has, but equally during a pandemic like this, no communication is the worst thing that you can do. You need to be present. You need to show up. You need to be able to connect with people, even if it is just a case of being able to say, hi, we're here, we're operating remotely, here are our contact details, this is what we're going to be doing, and connecting with people. Plus, when all of the offices shut, there wasn't any physical way. You couldn't go and knock on somebody's door, or you know, even if you picked up the phone to the HQ number, it didn't necessarily go through to somebody. So emails have really come back into their own, but they're not marketing emails, they're connection, they're updates. There was a fantastic set, and some of the CEOs of the big supermarkets actually ended up doing this very well, particularly Sainsbury's, where they sent out regular updates about stock availability, about, you know, how many supplies were coming in, what was the experience going to be like when you could go into the supermarket and not stumble over people because people were worried about it. So, you know, emails became quite good. Keep up your presence on social media and be present, be visible, and form connections. You know, social media is a conversation. It is not a podium to shout out, and we often use it as that, and that's not the most effective way. So we saw a real increase in conversations that were happening, communities that were forming, groups that were connecting, colleagues, peers in unrelated industries that we're getting together and tagging each other and organising different things. And you know, a shout out to Polly and the team that run the Bath HR network, who did a fantastic job at being able to bring together people who all had a common interest and a really pressing need to find out about how to keep people engaged and how to deal with some of those really tricky people situations that they were coming up against. I'm going to have to keep on moving backwards and forwards because the sunlight comes through my window, so I'll go backwards and forwards. And the final part here is do small gestures, because they go a long way. Think about what people need. If you're picking up the phone and if you're hearing a crack in somebody's voice and you know that they're struggling, those small things, whether it's internally, whether it's to key people that you work with or individuals within client teams, what things could you do that would make a difference? There were lots of companies that started doing care packages coming out. You know, how could we say thank you to a team or a collection of people? So those small gestures can really go a long way. The next bit in terms of marketing and how to do it, and I know Dan and I had many conversations about this in the early stages. When you're in an environment where you can't go out and sell in the traditional way, how can you connect with people? Even when there isn't a pandemic, our belief is that you shouldn't sell. You should engage, you should solve a problem, or you should provide and I put seduce here, but it's provide a pleasure need. So marketing will tend to operate on two different things, pain or pleasure. For example, if I am buying a car, if I am sat back, I've got all of the time in the world, I want to have a look at the new electric vehicles, which I'm doing at the moment. I am in a pleasure mode. I'm wanting to see what is available. I'm quite keen to explore. If, however, my old jalopy, which it is, breaks down and refuses to start one morning, I'm going to have a problem that needs to be solved, and I will be responding to messages that are about lots of stock availability. We can do click and collect. I can have it on your driveway. You can come and do a virtual test drive. So one product, same product, a car, two different emotional states that people are in, and you can do messages. So that's about putting yourself in the mind of your customer. What are they struggling with? What are they looking at? And how could you potentially help them solve those problems or provide a pleasurable experience for them? Especially when there wasn't that much pleasure that was going on during this. I think restaurants did a fine job in doing that, and I'll come on to some ideas. The other aspect was about innovating and doing things differently. And this was research that came out from Society of Human Resource Management, and it showed, it was in when I think it was in June 2020. So it was quite soon into the pandemic, and it showed 43% of small businesses really started to look at what they could do differently. 32% found a different way of delivering services, and then 22% identified that actually they'd need to upskill their people in a different way to equip them with different skills coming out. And furlough provided that opportunity for organisations to train their people during that point, and some deployed that really effectively. And I must admit, I looked at that and I thought, oh, 43%, it's nearly half. But then the other part of me went, it's only half. It's only half. Oh, under half of small businesses looked at doing things differently. And this is for a pandemic that's fundamentally altered every aspect of our lives. So, my message really is, do think about it. Think about how you can do things differently, and then the skills that you might need to have in place. While I've looked at the strategy, everybody always goes, so what does this mean? What does this mean? What can I actually do? Give me something to put into action, because I think we are hardwired for that. So I'm going to look at a few ideas and things that I've seen that people have done really effectively, and give a shout out to people on that. So creativity, we've spoken about changing your business model, setting up online classes, viewings, webinars, spoke about Polly doing it. And I've got a lovely example, Marcella from 299 Lighting, who registered, I can't see if she's on at the moment, set up and created continuous professional development courses for experienced lighting designers. Amazingly creative, said by the Royal Institute of British Architects that they've never seen anything like it, because they've managed to combine very technical training with Star Wars. So, you know, definitely a different experience and a new way to engage people. Creating experiences. We've spoken about training employees and new skills. And then I mentioned about time and the time that COVID gave us. And while, of course, we were busy and we were having to handle things on multiple fronts, both from an emotional, practical, logistical, physical, experience, we also did have some time, most of us, to be able to think about what we could do differently, and completing some of those big strategic projects, launching new businesses, creating new things, getting some of those big things off your to-do list. A lot of companies have done effectively, and actually it was one area that we really focused on as a business. What could we do differently, especially because, you know, from our perspective, come March, 2/3 of our businesses put projects on hold. 2/3 of clients just went, okay, we're not going to do anything. So, you know, we had that time to be able to say, okay, how can we do things differently? What can we use and utilize this time most effectively for, so that we can come out stronger at the end of it? Changing the business model. I mentioned food. Food is a passion of mine. Love food. I love restaurants. Really, my idea of heaven at the moment is being able to sit in a cafe, order some beautiful food, have a glass of wine and watch the world go by and listen to the conversations of other people. That's what I'm most looking forward to come 21st of June. Until then, the food industry has been phenomenally successful and innovative, from creating cook-at-home kits to your local restaurants delivering beautifully prepared home-cooked meals, to classes being held online. You've also had companies that you have used spare capacity, so people like Pernod and Brewdog, being distillers, had plenty of raw ingredients to be able to make hand sanitizer, stepped in, filled that need, gave some good messages to be able to communicate out during that as well. You've had car dealerships and estate agents having to pivot to do virtual tours online. Who knew that you could sell, you know, a £2 million house or even £500,000 house with a 15-minute virtual tour? It has been done, and people have had to adapt to it. One of my favourite stories is a small hotel that had existed. It wasn't in a beautiful town of Bradford-on-Avon, but in a similar sized town, and had been a destination point. So people always came to the hotel. They didn't come from the community. It wasn't very well used by the community, but obviously they couldn't have people come to stay to use their rooms. And what they ended up doing, which I thought was a brilliant idea, they did at-home concierge services. So instead of room service, they did at-home service, and anything that you wanted, if you wanted a meal being delivered from the restaurant kitchen, or you wanted a bottle of wine at 2 o'clock in the morning, they would be able to provide that from their concierge service. While they might not have been able to get you the best seats at the local theatre, they did some other things, from delivering manicure kits and all the rest of it. Creative ideas to solve a problem and a customer need, that people could redeploy their existing teams and staff to be able to do really effectively and put something positive out into the market. Education, I mentioned, was a big thing. This is a lovely story of a guy called Steve Moriarty, and he runs a gemstone business in Crown Point, Indiana. It's a husband and wife team. He's got a couple of kids that are now in the business. And his time used to be taken up by going to the mines in Tanzania or Madagascar or various other places and finding uncut gemstones that he would then bring back and be able to polish up and cut and facet in his own jewelry store. In April, he started doing live stream events. He couldn't go out to any of the mines. He was stuck at home. He was rather bored. So he put a camera on. He is not professional. He'd never done it before. He's now got 65,000 subscribers on YouTube. And he talks about the gemstones and the history of where they came from. And he lets us in, gives us an insight into the world of what the geology has done to be able to form these and what the different gemstones mean. And it's phenomenally engaging. And he's really, really normal. And I think we tend to think, who am I? What could I offer? What could I do? What right have I to be able to send and impart knowledge? And some of those are our own self-limiting beliefs. And Steve is an example of a guy who just does what he does every day and lets us into his world. And he's been phenomenal at it. And if you're into gemstones, really, really suggest that you watch some of those things. They're lovely. In terms of creativity, creating experiences, and I want to give a shout out to a very dear friend of mine who's had a hell of a year. So Jeanette Spirowski runs Travel Options for You, a travel agent based in Bradford-on-Avon. Alongside hotels and restaurants and food and accommodation, it's most probably been the hardest hit sector. Her year has been full of refunds and repatriations and moving different things. Nobody has been buying holidays. And although I think she's had a flurry of new business inquiries as soon as the announcement came out, we had a little bit of a pathway through coming out of COVID. A couple of Sundays ago, she sent out an invitation to join her with a wonderful game reserve in South Africa to do a virtual safari. And for 2 hours, we had 5 different ranges from the Shamwari Reserve. I grew up in South Africa, so any excuse to be able to take me back there is a benefit. But she had 5 different ranges. We were out in their buckies, in their trucks, as they were going over the African landscape, and they had found and introduced us to zebras, herds of elephants we saw with beautiful baby elephants that are just very, very young, giraffes, we saw cheetahs, which was incredible because they're very, very rare. And it was lovely. It was a horribly cold, one of those wintry weekends that we just had, and we were all snuggled up watching and taking part in this safari. A phenomenal experience that really bonded people to her and gave her something positive to be able to talk about out in the marketplace. So people have been doing things really well. When we focus on developing new skills, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, but digital is really what has happened over coronavirus. So we not only are we all working remotely, we are all now very au fait with doing Zoom calls, Zoom meetings, Google Hangouts, Microsoft Teams. We've adapted to a digital world. It has been a change, though, that has just accelerated. It's not completely new. It was always there. People were beginning to move to it. But some research and findings were that during the past year, the rate of digital adoption has been 5 to 10 times the predicted rate. So it has been phenomenal in terms of how people have had to adapt to a fully digital environment. It had come off the back, obviously, we were already moving, we already had automation, we had AI that was coming through, and artificial intelligence that was really demonstrating. I think some figures showed that 375 million people would need to reskill because of automation and AI. That's 14% of the entire global workforce would need to learn new and different skills. We also went online. and social media, even those platforms that have been in decline. So everybody had been predicting the end of Facebook for a long time as the young people failed to engage with the old person social media platform. But actually in April, it had its higher ever increase of usage and has really come back into its full, whatever we might think of it as a digital platform. So some of the skills that we need are not just the technical skills, not just adapting to the digital environment. They're also cognitive skills. And some of the leadership behaviours that are now most sought after are about collaboration and innovation. So leaders need new and different skills to be able to connect, and this goes into the social and emotional skills as well, to be able to connect differently with people, especially with the remote workforce. And I know it's a subject that's often talked about in business publications. And they also have to understand the emotional impact. So, and this goes on to the fourth one, resilience and adaptability. We work with a number of psychologists at Transform Communications, and one of my team, Carolyn, has been on a resilience course, and one of the eye-opening moments for her was for us, you can't just say to somebody, go on, be more resilient, be more adaptable, because it's not just a button that you can press or a light that you can switch on. Resilience comes from a sort of a really deep sense and place. And a lot of the time when we are most resilient is when we are most comfortable and most secure in doing things that we know we can do well. So although the world around us has changed, if we can play to our strengths, if we can do what comes naturally to us, we will be far more effective, first of all, but also far more resilient. At Transform, we've taken on 2 new people during COVID. So we've most probably spent, I think I've spent about 4 hours with Ellen since she joined us in September, face to face. So how can we understand what our strengths are as a team when we don't work physically close together? And we all undertook what's called a DISC assessment, which stands for, well, DISC, 4 different quadrants that go around. And then we shared them all, because I know that I might be good at one thing and I'm not very good at the other. And therefore I need to find and develop my team in a way that actually there are those skills available to make up for the shortfalls. So I can concentrate on doing what I'm good at, and the team can be good at what they're doing. So by that, we can then start to be a little bit more resilient and a little bit more and adapt quicker. Big projects. I mentioned that it was something that we'd focused on at Transform during this time, because we, as I said, we did have the time to be able to look at it. We gave a lot of our time away for free. But when we made the decision, and I would say that we had to make the decision about going forward, you know, when you look at it and you take a big step back and you see the impact that there was, and I will say this, I know a lot of my team are on the call. I did have that moment of going, do I really want to continue? This feels really hard. Can I do this? Can I continue going forward? It's going to mean a lot of change and a lot of focus, and I had to really think about that and do that. And all I can say is thank you to the team for continuing to have faith, because when that decision was made of going, yes, and I know what our purpose is, and I know that we're going to come out of this bigger and better and stronger, I was then in a mental place to be able to undertake some of these big projects. So we rebranded Transform Communications. We launched a new website of 83 pages deep that we wrote ourselves internally. We really went all out in trying to identify where our strengths lay. So we know that we're really good on the B2B side of things, and professional and financial services. Technology is a big thing. We know we deal with complex problems and complex subjects, and we love making those simple. And then we also launched a new business. So way back in November 2019, Dan had just joined the business, and we were taking a road trip round. I think we did about 1,000 miles in 3 days or 2 days, going all around the country and visiting clients. We were coming back from Newcastle, and we started talking about the shift to digital. We create content in Transform Communications, and then we work with a lot of digital agencies to be able to get that out, whether it's through lead generation or through email marketing campaigns. And sometimes we had been disappointed, and we felt that our clients didn't necessarily get the strategic straight line of sight all the way through to delivery. So we knew we could do it differently, and we knew we could do it better. But it was one of those conversations where we went, yes, but we're really busy. And priorities are that we really need to focus on Transform Communications, and that's going to be the whole thing for 2020, and perhaps 2021 we'll revisit it. COVID shifted all of that, and we thought, why the hell not? Why don't we just go for it? The time is right now. We've got time, and it will give us something, I'm going to shift again, something to be able to talk about out in the marketplace that showed some initiative and creativity. So we incorporated in July, and we launched formally in the autumn. And what I think, as much as anything, the lessons that we learned during this point is that you have to get over the emotional upheaval that can come through a crisis of any type, and definitely through COVID. Once you get to terms with that, and as creatures, we are resilient, we can adapt really quickly, and I think it's been phenomenal what people have done. Then it's the time for thinking strategically. Really, what do we want to put out into the world? There's a lovely phrase that is, what do you want to give the world? That legacy that you want to leave behind. How do you want to be out in the world? And once you've identified that, you can then look at your customers, how you want to connect with them, and then think about the creative, tactical elements that you can put in place that really will help you market your way out of a pandemic. So that's my very long answer to